right, so thank you everyone for coming to this final session of the Rendezvous. This is an opportunity for us to talk about what we've learned, what we're taking away, and any next steps we want to bring into the world. Any further communication we want to have, any projects we want to start. But first, a couple of housekeeping things. If you haven't registered, like if somebody else gave you the links to this Zoom who wasn't me, please do register. It's helpful for us to know who's been here. And it can help with us getting funding for things like this in the future. I also wanted to give a really big thank you to our sponsors. So MedWork coordinated this event, but we could not have done it without our sponsors, the Madison Cooperative Development Coalition, the CUNA Mutual Group, Shared Capital Cooperative, Summit Credit Union, Union Cab of Madison, Cooperative Network, the Willie Street Co-op, Wagner CPAs, the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, and of course, the Interpreters Cooperative of Madison. So big thanks to all of our sponsors, in particular, making it possible for us to offer interpretation, which is really important to us as an organization. And so also a big thank you to the individual interpreters for being here and working so hard to make our event more accessible. Also, we'll be sending out within the next week or two, we'll be sending out a list of participants. When you registered, you indicated if you didn't want to be included in that. But if you said yes to being included, we'll send that out, along with hopefully links to the videos. I don't know how long it will take to actually get those posted, but definitely we'll be pulling out links from the chat, as many of them as we can. So if there's resources that you didn't capture from the chat, hopefully we'll be able to capture those and send those out. We also have a feedback form that we'll be posting at the end of this session, but we do really appreciate feedback. We use your feedback to build on next year's event and to try to meet the needs of our regional community as best as possible. I also wanted to just mention a few words about MadWork and who we are and what we do. MadWork is Madison's worker cooperative group. We're a cooperative of worker cooperatives. And we have a couple of different things that we've been working on recently. One of which is the trade school course that we talked about this morning, which is working to create a course at the trade school level that teaches people how to create a worker cooperative and operate a worker cooperative. We are working on some more active co-op development than we have in the past. So trying to really think about what kinds of co-ops we'd like to see in Madison and working to find people who might be able to help build those co-ops. We're working to formalize our peer network. Obviously, this regional rendezvous is a big piece of what we do, especially in the few months leading up to it. It's a large chunk of what our time goes towards. And then finally, the other thing I want to mention is we've had for the last year and a few months a reading group going that meets every other week that you can find out more information about on our website. Currently, we're reading a book called No Bosses. We started out last year reading Collective Courage. And one of the things that people were really struck by was that there were a lot of study groups that led to cooperatives, and that was sort of a piece of a lot of the cooperatives that formed. So we decided to keep reading together. And it's been a really great way to build both community and to do education among ourselves. So if you're interested in our reading group, you can keep your eyes on our website and you can learn more about it that way. We announce it when the new session is starting. Also, coming up soon, I've been asked to announce, or reminded to announce, that MadWork is going to be hosting a fundraising raffle. This is something that we had started working on 2 years ago at the first regional rendezvous. You may remember us talking about that a little bit, but then the pandemic happened and we were not able to get it off the ground. But we're going to be starting a raffle. We'll be selling tickets starting sometime in late April or early May, with a drawing in late July. So please do keep your eyes to your email about how to purchase tickets. We've got some really fantastic grand prizes available. A week in a cabin, an iMac, plus some smaller prizes. So that's something that we'll be doing to support MadWork, but that hopefully folks from around the area can participate in. MadWork folks, is there anything I'm missing? And actually, if you're from MadWork, do you want to just like give a wave? So we do have a lot of MadWork board members here. Yes, luckily the week in the cabin and the iMac are separate, so you can actually disconnect for your week in the cabin, and you don't have to be at an iMac, which to me sounds like a great idea after spending all weekend on Zoom. So I wanted to open up the space to any reflections that people have, or anything that people want to take with them, either into this broader community or into your local community. And maybe people can just speak up, and if we end up with too many people trying to speak at once, we can keep track of a stack.
Just want to give back so much gratitude and excitement and happiness and gratitude.
Hillary.
I feel so excited to take back a lot of what I learned this weekend to my community. One of the biggest things was just actually making sort of a map of, based on what Charity was saying in her presentation about the building blocks of what already exists here in Minneapolis, like what we can use and what we need to strengthen relationships between. And it just, I feel excited that maybe we're on the verge of starting a bunch more worker co-ops in the Twin Cities, which has been sort of so for a long time. So thank you for all the lessons.
Mike, I saw your stack.
Yeah, thank you for inviting or accepting the presentation the session this year for the People's Market. Look forward to, proposing more. I will always show up with that exact same session, because I think we do need far more offers and needs markets than we are hosting in all of these spaces. But yeah, I've appreciated all of the other sessions I was able to attend. I was unfortunate that I mixed up that the coffee hour, there was an educator coffee hour. So if there was hot topics there, I look forward to maybe one-on-oneing with someone to hear what those were. But yeah, it's been a really great session. Otherwise, there were some really great, hazy endings and after chat, happening beyond some of the sessions, specifically on social cooperatives, which probably should be a session next year. And yeah, so I've appreciated some relationship building and looking forward to more building within this here, Rust Belt industry light, or left behind region that we are in. Check.
What's everybody think about the time of year that we do this? We've tried this, well, in the pandemic, it was in March, I guess, when we held the first one. Last year, it was more in the fall, I think, or closer to the fall.
Last year was May, like late May.
Well, that's closer to the fall by a month. Would people like to see this in the spring, in the fall, in the winter? When is a good time? Go for it, Steve.
I kind of like having it in the spring because it's roughly halfway across the year from October, which is co-op month. And it kind of gives us an excuse to do publicity not once during the year, but twice. It kind of keeps us in the front of people's minds, because we don't do anything quite like this for co-op month, but it's kind of a separate reason to be, raising awareness of co-ops. So we have kind of a spring event and then kind of a fall event. So I'd keep it the way it is.
Me personally, I kind of like it in the spring because it doesn't seem like we're competing with any other co-op events. So, and there's enough time from our last one that it seems like we're due about this time of year.
I have a related question, which is last year, the first year we were on 2 weekdays. Last year we were 1 weekday and 1 weekend day. This year we were both weekend days. What works better for people? We really want to prioritize making it accessible to people who are working, and making it accessible to worker owners in particular. What do people think about timing of weekdays versus weekends?
Since no one else is saying anything, or okay, I thought hopefully next year we can do it in person, but we'll lean towards May then. So it's a little warmer outside, and we can do some more things for those folks who would travel to Madison.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We're really hoping to be in Madison next year. And in large part, that's because one of the things we really want with this event is for people to connect with each other. Our hope for this event is not that it's like a series of lectures, but that it's a series of opportunities for people to connect and build connections across the region. And we've tried to do that over Zoom, and I think people have done a really great job reaching out to each other over Zoom, and exchanging contact information and resources. But it is a little bit easier to do that in person when you can actually, somebody was saying the other day, like you can talk to people in the hallway at lunchtime. So hopefully the pandemic will wind down even further by next year, or at least by the time we start planning for next year. But this year we decided it was probably safest to stick with virtual. And related to those questions that we just asked, I'm gonna put, for the first time of many times, I'm gonna put the feedback form in the chat. We'll leave it open for about a week. So if you don't feel like doing it right now, that's fine. But we do ask a few questions about like your preferences around timing and whether you'd be interested in attending something in person, as well as to ask about some of the sessions at this year's event. It's helpful for us to know what people enjoyed, what people thought could be different, what you got the most out of. Again, because we want this to be an event that builds our regional community, and not just that builds what a couple of us think is important. I'd be curious to know if anyone has anything in particular that they learned this weekend that they didn't already know. Since our theme is education, like what is something you learned?
Oh man, okay. I will be curious to think on that question myself. But I first wanted to share just like something kind of in response to some of those first sets of questions. I think, a silver lining to the virtual conference, at least for me, has been, that while I do love those, like hallway interactions, I find often like at the end of a conference, I like haven't left the hotel for 2 days or something. And I just like need a day to recover. And so having like being able to kind of, have clear times where I can step away and catch my breath and also have some time to go outside and go for a walk has been nice. And so it would be cool to think about how to maybe incorporate those into an in-person conference so we can have the best of both.
David, do you want to read your comment from the chat so we get it for the interpretation?
Oh, sure. I said, Steve and Chris put together a great session yesterday introducing the Co-op Connection Network. I hope people will act on their invitation and get involved with building out the Co-op Connection Network.
Esther.
Oh, yeah, I think like something that struck me was the depth of the conversations that we got to have throughout the workshops, and like all the different voices and perspectives on these different topics that we're all passionate about. So it just felt really nice to get to connect with each other, and I really appreciate everyone that came, because that's pretty special. And I think it's also nice with the time of year, because it's like halfway through the year of the national conferences, so it feels good to have a space to like still get to catch up a little and connect a little bit and establish more cooperative friendships and learnings. So, yeah.
Charity?
One of the things I really appreciated about the content and everyone's presentations was, it wasn't just about worker cooperatives. Like there's so much movement work being done by the folks in this room. And so I really loved learning about that, how co-ops are, really connected to community and not these just insular businesses. And I really appreciated it, whether it was like learning about all the political work that the compost co-op is doing, thinking about how the needs and the offers and needs market like really can support our communities, where we can find a way to support each other, co-ops and prisons, that work that's being done. So I just really just appreciated that aspect of it. Thank you.
I'm just going to say I was especially touched by the co-ops and prisons presentation, and thought a bit about this idea of nominating a prison as an individual cooperative. I thought about that a bit from the standpoint of being a part of Union Cab, and like generating the pathways for people as they leave prison. And I'm going to have that discussion at the cooperative. There are limitations with regard to getting taxi licenses and so on when it comes to having a record. But there's also been some movement with the city, like looking at individual cases and being more malleable than I guess more forward thinking in that regard. So it's not like there's a total barrier, but it also got me thinking that it's something that I'd like MadWork to consider more so as well, because our concentration has been so strongly on education and valuing that, and I wonder what we could do to get conversations started around both the building out of internal cooperative efforts that interface between prisons and the external. There were a couple different levels that were brought up during the seminar. I just feel like it's incredibly meaningful, and I think about it a little bit, and I'll be quiet in a moment, but in the context of learning from a hire we had last year who came out of the military and really described his life and his fellow veteran lives as really being thoroughly damaged by their experiences and their longing for meaningful work and solidarity. And it spoke to me like this is really a demographic like ex-veterans, but I would think it would apply just as well to people coming out of prison who, I mean, we all need co-ops. We all need the community building that co-ops present. But I think that there are definitely demographics that we can do better to respond to, and it would really, like solve so many problems at once, take on so many different issues at once.
I'm doing that teacher thing where I pause to see if anybody else wants to talk. I think you're absolutely right, David. I love that comment. And I think co-ops can be really creative in how they can do that. So I had mentioned during my session, the Nehemiah connection and supporting their work to build that co-op pipeline, but more specifically, the Madison Cannabis Community Cooperative that I'm working with, really intentionally is thinking ahead towards really wanting to bring formerly incarcerated, on like cannabis charges folks, victims of the drug war, into the co-op, but being really creative in their bylaws, because if you have that kind of conviction, you have certain barriers to ownership and things like that. So they're being really creative about how they would treat them as basically as a member in a weird, like, it's just really interesting how they're thinking ahead. So I think we can build in ways to work around the barriers that different populations like formerly incarcerated folks deal with.
I'd be down to work on that with folks too.
And actually, the building that MadWork's office is in is also the home of the Books to Prisoners project. So maybe there's a way to connect with those organizations in terms of maybe types of books that are available to people, and finding out if they're in touch with people who are returning and might be interested in cooperatives. So it might be an opportunity to network with some of our local, like very hyper-local organizations. Esther.
That would be good. I think that sounds real good. And our Jessica, our report's wrapping up in June, I believe. So just a heads up, if that's of interest for, like if you want to get a grant and you want to like back it up with some of the report or something like that. And then potentially like the US Federation could maybe do more on this too. Like maybe we can do what we want to do, but then also like promote it, because they do a lot with like Movement for Black Lives, and that could be a nice overlap too. So yeah, and other social movements, but yeah.
Switching a little bit away from this and to the kind of general question of things learned, something that's coming to mind, and of course, I mean, just like learn so much in every session. I mean, I feel like every session I was just like, had my mind blown. But beyond the direct content, I think is just like seeing how much is going on, and like the awareness of all the different co-ops and co-op support models that already exist, in this sense of oh man, like we don't need to recreate all of this from scratch. It's very exciting.
Something that I'm really interested in after the Principal 5 panel yesterday is the idea of like a educational materials share, like an opportunity for co-ops to sort of bring together what educational opportunities they offer to their members and what educational materials they have, and sort of share that information with each other so that co-ops can sort of learn from each other what education is being done, and also borrow materials from each other rather than having to like start from scratch. I know that's something MedWork has talked about, like collecting bylaws and policies from co-ops in the past, and being able to have like a library of those things. But I'm kind of interested in adding educational materials to that, since education is such a critical piece of cooperatives. That it seems like there's a lot of opportunity to learn from each other, specifically around education. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I think, kind of along those lines, your work and what you were sharing this morning as far as like the Umandoli about the trade school, came to mind as like a prime example of, oh my goodness, like don't have to like recreate this from scratch. Like that's like just a huge asset. So that came to mind. And something else, I'm not sure what I forgot exactly what it was you said that reminded me of this, but in the democratic education workshop, something that stood out to me that kind of speaks to a different interest of mine was the point that the families that were involved in these democratic schools were not necessarily leftist families. I'm someone who's like very opposed to both major political parties, and so interested in the potential for worker cooperatives to be a place to unite the working class across kind of, regardless of how they're voting, in the current two-party system, where I think like neither current party really represents or fights for the working class.
A direct to that, this is Hillary. I think that there's been some cross-pollination work with the Working Families Party, especially in East Coast, like Pennsylvania and maybe Baltimore. So that's a thing to find out more about. And then it's maybe not what you were. I mean, if you're opposed to both parties, then this maybe doesn't relate as much, but NCBA, the National Cooperative Business Association, is doing a Get Out the Vote campaign amongst cooperatives of all kinds. And so the trying to motivate members to just at least be registered and participate, and without any, they don't have like a partisan agenda about it, because they can't anyway. So, but that's a thing that I just heard about.
Oh yeah, I totally support that. Love voter registration, voting rights, very pro voting rights.
Let me give a little plug to Union Cab. This last Tuesday, we drove people to the polls for free again. We've been doing it for, I believe this is our ninth year doing it without any funding, and going through Uber and Lyft and COVID and so on, like barely scraping by, but still devoting resources to getting people to the polls. And I'm saying this in part because I always thought that we were getting grants. I don't know, it took me a while to get into governance and actually look at the financials and figure out that we aren't. So it's something that honestly I would like to get some help with in the future, if possible, because I think it's called Democracy in Motion. So yeah, thanks.
Abby, I think you had your hand up.
I think that was a mistake. Thank you, though.
I'll just note there's some comments in the chat about worker co-ops being a bridge issue that a lot of conservatives will get behind. And that because of the tradition of co-ops in Wisconsin in the ag industry and rural areas, both sides of the aisle can get behind them. And that worker co-ops and cooperatives in general are issues that can possibly confound the usual US partisan talking points if handled well. Hillary.
Sorry, that just made me think of another thing too. The US Federation of Worker Co-ops was working a few years ago, first with Keith Ellison's office when he was still a state or a representative in the US House, and then with Ro Khanna on a bill for worker co-op development, basically money for worker co-op development and recognition of worker co-ops as a community development tool. And they are looking for a Republican co-sponsor. So if anyone's got a Republican representative representing you in the US House who's into this kind of stuff, you can get in touch with Mo at the Federation, or let me know. I'm in touch with her too. And because it's kind of hard to find a reasonable Republican these days sometimes. And they asked me about Minnesota and I was like, nope, none of ours. So
I'm actually just dropped this in the chat, but I'm really curious to hear from people if anyone actually in Wisconsin is in Mike Gallagher's district, if he's as reasonable as some news stories have led me to believe.
I don't know, but I can look him up.
Yeah, Charity just put what I was going to say, which is that there's also a Congressional Co-op Business Caucus or Congressional Co-op Caucus that you can encourage your representatives to get involved with. But also one of our sponsors is Cooperative Network, which works in Wisconsin and Minnesota on legislative issues at the state level. And again, sometimes it's left-leaning, sometimes it's more right-leaning, sometimes it's more centrist. But they're a good resource for finding out about what legislation might be available at the state level and how you can get involved in advocating for those things. Obviously, that's not the same as federal level, but it's still an important thing to be doing and can help lead to some of the federal changes, potentially, if enough states are supporting co-ops. It makes it easier to bring it to the federal level. And in the chat, Josh says that maybe CHS might have some contacts with co-op friendly Republican electeds. I think actually going back to the theme of this event, trying to bring our elected officials to events like this is a really good thing to do, because education is a big piece of what we need to be doing at the political level of that level, that a lot of our representatives at the city, state, federal level just don't know very much about cooperatives or why they might be beneficial to their districts. So figuring out how we can do that education, like offering examples of successful worker cooperatives and how they've benefited the community, offering examples from other places of how co-op legislation has benefited the state, for example, or the city, especially at the city and state level. Like I think a lot of places like to keep up with each other. That like if one place does something, you can sometimes compare it to a similar city and say, well, this other city that we often compare ourselves to has done this, so we should try it too. So for example, like Madison has city funding for co-op development. Like if your city looks up to Madison sometimes, point to that and say, you know, Madison, Wisconsin put aside money. Surely we can do the same thing. Charity, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think another important aspect of worker co-op development that you know, can cross the aisles or that like everyone can get behind is, you know, the silver tsunami and converting existing businesses to co-ops. So instead of losing those jobs in our communities, you know, economic developers and, you know, business people and city councils and like all those things are, you know, even at the county level, you can really sell the idea of supporting worker cooperatives based on retaining those jobs.
Some things, oh, Esther, I see you wanted to be on stack.
I do, but if anyone has something to continue this part of the conversation, we'll keep going because mine is a little different topic.
Oh, I'll come off mute to put it into the audio. I think it'd be a great way to play on the state rivalry, Minnesota, Wisconsin, that you know, we can't let any city in Wisconsin be ahead of us.
You want to go for it, Esther?
Sure. So yeah, so I was wondering, okay, so I thought something that's come up with MadWork and could be applicable to the Rendezvous is getting more worker owners from our co-ops, our respective co-ops, to join. So like, you know, sometimes like, and I'm the same way, but like sometimes it can be like, you know, like one person from a co-op who's excited about this. So how do we engage more of the co-op, you know, more worker owners? So I was wondering if folks have ideas on that, or like if there could be like group trainings that like co-ops could plan for that the Rendezvous could hold, and then maybe folks would come to other sessions or something like that, or if there are other ideas. So throwing it out there.
So I'm going to hop in for a second. So at the first Rendezvous, we held that at the Madison Public Library. And for those of you that attended, I mean, it's a beautiful space. It's right downtown. It worked great because we joined up with some meetings that were held at the city for some of the folks that came down from Minneapolis, had meetings with our city council people. So it was a beautiful facility, but we're kind of hoping, and this is just a maybe, but at the next in-person one we have the new Democratic School here, and they also have a beautiful facility that's got like not only auditoriums but breakout classrooms, and I'm lucky that's really close to where I'm located, Isthmus. So I'm hoping that Isthmus can rent space from them at some point just to use their facility. But man, it would be great to have a conference there, because with the classrooms and all the capability they have, it would be really cool. So it's something I'm looking forward to the next one.
I want to quick respond to Esther's idea. I was lucky, I don't know if you guys remember Greg Brown many years ago, to be ushered into MadWork. And in fact, he helped me get involved with Rainbow Books too. So he was kind of like a mentor in a certain sense. And I wonder, I've been thinking about having a initiative like this at Union Cab, where we're more explicitly trying to mentor people into, I guess you might say, the more like advocacy oriented branch of being a worker owner. anyway, I'm just trying to go with what you were saying, Esther. I think I'm overworked at this point, and I'm wearing too many hats, and I feel guilty that the key person from Union Cab in all of these different capacities. And I kind of feel around and try and get people involved, like you presented yesterday with JP. So maybe she's going to be a new person. But I think it takes something that is a little bit more organized to ensure that you get people in the pipeline doing this kind of stuff. Check.
I think one advantage of in-person is that it's a little easier to like bring a cohort if it's in person rather than online, where you just sort of like you're sitting at home and you join or you don't join. Like if we have the event in person in Madison next year, like I could imagine it might be fun for a couple of people from one of the Minneapolis co-ops to get in a car and drive down together and participate as a group, rather than hoping that people take their time to sit on Zoom in their own house and participate. I like David's mentorship idea too. I think that's really key, is to make sure that not just like mentorship in the sense of training, but mentorship in the sense of like encouraging other worker owners to participate in things like MadWork, like the Rendezvous, like the Federation. So sort of going beyond just here's how you participate in our co-op, but here's how you participate in co-ops broadly speaking. Because I think sometimes people just don't know why they would want to come to a conference like this. You know, like it's just another thing to do and we're all busy. So, but I think it's a really good question. Yeah.
I wonder if we could do like a between co-op mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
That could be cool.
In Chicago, we actually have convened a cross cooperative forum, very informal, called the name is now called Chicago Co-op Convergence, and it's basically a once a month forum. For the most part, no set agenda, although we have done topics, but it housing co-ops, food co-ops, as well as worker-owned co-ops are invited. And sometimes we get low attendance, sometimes we get high attendance. Once the group gets of any size, it's always logistics and finding times that work for everybody are always a challenge, and no one party is always going to be satisfied. But part of it is simply, we've been going on for a year now in this forum, and part of it is just that you just have to have sort of faith and sort of just meet, even if there's only 2 people in one meeting, and then there's 20 in the next one, and just have some constancy or rhythm, even if it's not necessarily every month, it could be every quarter. But just the fact that this is every year is something to look forward to.
I just want to elevate Hillary's comment in the chat that enthusiasts among us could informally poll co-owners and see what would get them excited to come to a conference, since they aren't in the room to address the question. I think that's a really good idea, to try to find out like what people value and what would make something like this valuable to people. And then Renata adds, yes, identifying needs and creating value for participants. And that Mike spoke really well to that on yesterday's session about the Co-op Connection Network. We have a few minutes for any last thoughts, and then we'll move into some time for announcements. Okay, well, let's move into some space for announcements. If there's anything folks would like to announce, I know there are some folks here from some initiatives that started out of last year's Rendezvous that might be interested in announcing those. I know there's other people here who are involved in a variety of different organizations and trainings. So just an opportunity to share information about what's going on and coming up in the co-op realm.
Yeah, I want to call out the Co-op Connection Network. There's a sign up form earlier in the chat. And also invite you all to put your co-ops on the map that we are building. There's also a sign up for that. Currently, I believe we are meeting on the second. Josh, are you here? Correct me if I'm wrong, or Rec or whoever. It's the second Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. Central. Is that correct?
I'm not sure which one of the month it is, but it's this Wednesday, according to my calendar.
Same.
So whatever week this is. So if you're interested, you could easily join starting this week. And oh, I lost it. Josh, do you want to say a little bit about the Worker Co-op Solidarity Fund?
I will try fight with my microphone and try.
We can't hear you.
Sorry.
You want me to try to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that came out of last year's Rendezvous was inspired by a group of co-ops in England that are doing a fund where people contribute $1 a week to a solidarity fund. And so a group of us started meeting after last year's Rendezvous, and we're calling it the Worker Co-op Solidarity Fund. And we welcome more people to get involved. Right now, where we're at is working on sort of what the fund is going to be used for and how we'll distribute the funds before we start actually soliciting money from people. And Josh put in the chat, that's the third Fridays at 4 p.m. Central. Any other announcements? I'm seeing a bunch of things in the chat. Do people want to speak those out loud?
Yeah, Solidarity Economy 101 tomorrow. If you've never attended, either with USN or the New Economy Coalition Train the Trainer working group, educator working group, then this is just an opportunity to experience it, see if you might be useful for your city or your context, and yeah, do it with other people. Check.
I posted a link to an upcoming webinar that the UW Center for Cooperatives is doing. You know, when I was talking about like city council folks, you know, economic developers in your city, those kind of people you want to convince that worker co-ops is a solution for, you know, job retention and business retention. That I think that would be a good webinar to share. Kind of built for that audience.
And I shared how the US Federation of Worker Co-ops always has the peer networks and oh, oops, I meant to say peer networks and member councils. Sorry, in the chat. But there are a lot of links there to learn more. Or Hillary and I are on the board if you want to talk with us. You know, we're here. But they have like policy and advocacy. They're going to start up their international council soon and racial and economic justice council soon. They have a new bookstore co-op peer network, union co-ops network. So just throwing it out there.
And I put a link in the chat for
Just in case anyone here who's not from MadWork is connected to people. In case you're not from MadWork, but you're connected to people in Madison, MadWork is hosting monthly socials on the fourth Thursday of the month. So there's information about that on our website, but if you know any worker owners in Madison who you think might be interested in just getting together casually to talk without an agenda with other worker owners, that's something that we're trying to really get off the ground. And we're hoping to switch to in person in April. So it won't be more hours on Zoom. And to answer the question about, is that the same group that came out of last year's Rendezvous, the $1 a week group? Yes, it is. The $1 a week group is now the Worker Co-op Solidarity Fund, because we haven't decided on an amount of funding per time period that we'd be asking for. And then I guess the one other initiative is the trade school project that MadWork has been working on. We have a grant to work on the curriculum. And so one of the things that is part of that grant is that the curriculum will be publicly available. So if you know anyone who's interested in starting a course at the trade school level, feel free to get in touch with me and I can share what we've got so far and keep you posted as we develop it further.
Well, I'll hop in and do some, how shameful, same promotion. I don't know, it's hard for me to do this, but I used to be a co-op developer, and through my work, I found that I really wanted to see more beautiful art and more graphics around just growing the co-op movement and just how powerful good visuals were on me and my psyche. So I went back to school and became a graphic designer, and now I design for like the dream is to design just for co-ops. So if any of your co-ops ever needs any materials, I'll plug my info on the chat. And I try to do always sliding scale and adjust to whatever budgets people are working with. And yeah, I haven't been very voicey to like I've been pretty sick this week, but I've really enjoyed it and I've learned so much. So I'm very grateful for all the efforts you put into this. It was really nice.
Thank you. That's a great resource to know about, that you're available to do that kind of work. Because I think, and it's often a question is like, who can help us with this? So we just have a few more minutes if anyone has any last thoughts, and then we'll close.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much. Because we really appreciate you. You've made a lot of things come alive for MadWork. Thank you so much for all your work.
You're very welcome. And thank you everyone for being here. I didn't include all of you in the list of thank yous, but thank you to everyone who came and participated and made the sessions really come to life. It would not be the same without your participation.
Thanks to the interpreters.
Yes, big thanks to the interpreters.
Round of applause.
Okay, well, we will be in touch with some follow-up information in the next week. Again, I'm going to post the feedback form link in the chat. And we will see you hopefully next spring at the 4th regional rendezvous. We are going to make this a tradition. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Woohoo.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good to see everybody.
Nice to see you all.